green button.
Yeah, I got it. Temporary update done. Should be one better, and then I got major update happening, captain's meeting. Should be much better.
All right, it's 5 o'clock. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us. This microphone sounds lighter or louder than normal, but hopefully you can all hear me and everyone can hear us at home. So this regular meeting of the Carefree Town Council will come to order. Town Clerk, please take a silent roll call. And Lisa Rendy, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And I would just remind all council members and anyone who comes up to the podium to speak into the microphone so everyone can hear you and everyone at home can hear you because we're streaming the meetings live. First up on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items listed hereunder are considered to be routine by the town council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be discussed separately. Item number 1, we will remove item number 1. Item numbers 2 and 3, we will defer to March 5th because they're not in your packet. Item number 4, acceptance into the public record of the January 2024 paid bills. Item 5, acceptance of the cash receipts and disbursements report for November 2023. Item 6, approval of the Belgian Waffle Ride Arizona bicycle event on March 1st and 2nd, 2024. Officers, deputies at intersections during the race. Bike lanes will be utilized and bike riders will be released incrementally. No street closures are required. The event is hosted at Stagecoach Village in Cave Creek, Arizona, and will travel through Cave Creek, Carefree, Scottsdale, and county areas. Would anyone like to pull any of the items 4, 5, and 6? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda items 4, 5, and 6.
Motion to approve items 4, 5, and 6.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Passes unanimously. So we have one councilman, Councilman Johnson. He's on the phone, so he's participating remotely. Item number 7, current events. Vice Mayor, you have current events?
So I have a few things, Mayor. First, we have a budget workshop coming up, which is a revenue forecasting. And I believe we have 3 of these. Am I right, Gary? And the first one is Tuesday, February 20th at 2 o'clock in these council chambers. And this meeting will focus on the revenue forecasting. We have a general plan update that has been going on since November of 22. And so there are 3 phases. The first phase was November of 22 through February of 23rd. Phase 2 was February 23rd through November of 23. And phase 3 is going on right now, December of 23 through May of 24. And it will go to P&Z, it'll come to the town council, and then the final adoption will be made in May. And then the final thing will be, it will be on your ballots in November. Did I do that? No. Yes. Yeah, okay. And then the garden seminar series is still going on, this time on February 10th in the morning in the Sanderson Lincoln Pavilion Joanna Sanchez will be talking about desert medicinal plants, and it'll give you a chance to participate in the demonstration of desert plants as medicines, and you'll be able to see, touch, taste, sample, and take home, as well as she'll give you some ideas of recipes and procedures. That should be pretty cool, although I'm always worried about picking something that's poisonous. And then lastly, you've probably noticed as you're driving around the Carefree Highway improvements that the city of Scottsdale is doing between Tom Darlington and Cave Creek Road. They will conduct their first public meeting to discuss their proposed improvements on February 12th at 6 p.m. in the Holland Center, which is next to the YMCA on 60th, just south of Carefree Highway. And that project is planned to expand that segment of Carefree Highway from 2 to 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction, with the center landscaped and a raised median island with turn lanes at major access points. And so that should be a big improvement, and that's all I have.
Okay, I have a few things. On this coming Friday, the 8th, we have Carefree Conversations in the Visitor Center. So we'll be there from 9 until 11 a.m. So I'll be there, Councilman DeLisi will be there, and Councilwoman Sheila Amoroso will be there. So if you can, please come on by. It's informal, it's a great chance to speak with us. Next, you might recall from our last council meeting, we spoke about Pima Road and Cave Creek Road intersection and possible improvements that could occur there. So since we had the meeting, in late January, Maricopa Association of Governments approved $250,000 to study improvements at that intersection and about 4 miles south. So they'll study the possibility of improvements at the Pima Cave Creek intersection and at the Stagecoach intersection. And there'll be public meetings at the outset, and once they get to work, there'll be additional public meetings. So their first step, the money's approved, is for MAG, Maricopa Association of Governments, to put out an RFQ for consultants, and they'll hire someone and they'll get on with it. So that's really good news. And it'll make that intersection safer. It'll improve the capacity and efficiency of passing through there. And we'll have a seat at the table. So that's great. We're always talking about traffic. So you might recall, we've talked about working with MCSO to get them more involved in our community. So on the 23rd of February, they're going to do Coffee with the Cop. We've talked about that, so this will be the first one. And it'll be February 23rd from 8 a.m. early in the morning to 10 p.m. the Black Mountain Coffee Shop outside. So there'll be an officer or two there. Captain Letourneau will be there. He's the captain for Precinct 4. He's our captain. And he'll have some other folks there, 1 or 2. And so it's a chance to just engage, ask questions, tell them what's on your mind. It's really a good thing. Secondly, talking with the captain, and you might recall when we were doing our conversations about managing speeds, we talked about we suggested that we have MCSO park an empty traffic patrol car somewhere. They don't have the manpower to be everywhere all the time, but maybe they have an extra car that's not being utilized. They can just park it somewhere. And just the presence of that vehicle can help mitigate speed. So they have agreed to start doing that in February as their assets allow them to do it. That is a welcome, very good thing. You might have seen an announcement we made, or you might have seen in the newspaper, about 2 awards that were given by the Arizona General Contractors Association. So they look at all the construction projects throughout the state. And it was late January. They recognized 13 projects. And our town was affiliated with 2 of those projects. So it's really amazing. I mean, considering that we're 3,700 people, relatively small town out of 91 towns, and there's probably, well north of 100, probably a few hundred different projects. So the the Aiken Gardner Water Consolidation Project. Aiken Gardner, that contractor, was recognized, and VSS International was recognized for the pavement project they did for us last year. So they do all the work. But to make all this happen, we have to pick the contractor, so we pick some pretty good contractors. Two, we have a big hand in the design, and they have to work with us. So as a result of that, of all those things, and their hard work, and they're good guys, both of those companies, they were recognized, and that's a big deal. So Gary Neese deserves a lot of credit for the pavement job. Mark Millstone, who has since retired, the town engineer, deserves credit, and Greg Crossman, who managed that water consolidation project, deserves a lot of credit for that to happen. And lastly, we want to talk about Sky Ranch. So Sky Ranch has, with the town, a Sky Ranch Community Relations Committee. So the purpose of that committee is to make sure that Sky Ranch, a privately held airport, lives up to their special use permit and gets along with all the neighbors. And by the SUP, by the special use permit, we're entitled to have a presence on that committee. So a year ago, or 2 years ago, in March 2022, we appointed members to that committee. And they've served us well. And we've done some, right? We've come up with circulate people through town council with term limits and staggered terms. We've come up with ways to do the same with planning and zoning. And so keeping in that spirit, we're going to do the same thing with this committee. So we're coming up in the 2-year anniversary of those appointments. And at the next council meeting, we will make new appointments or reappoint the existing members. So if you're interested in participating, or if you're on that committee and you want to do it again, please send a letter of interest to the town clerk. And by February 20th and at the March 5th meeting, we'll make that appointment, or those appointments. We'll appoint 2. And that's all I have.
And then they'll go on the same rotation And then they'll go on the same rotation that we have. Some will be appointed for 4-year terms and some for 2.
I think we can just do it every couple of years.
Okay.
It gets too complicated.
Mr. Mayor, question for you. We appointed 3 to that committee, so wouldn't all 3 be up for appointment then, or?
Yeah, they're all 3 up for appointment. So in looking back on the SUP, I thought at the time, I thought it was the right, I thought we could appoint 3 because the way it was written. But I was incorrect. So we appointed 3. Going forward, we will appoint 2. A good question.
Which of the 3 stays on?
Oh, well, they all will be up for reappointment.
Oh, okay, so only
we're
2 out of the 3 then, if they decide, okay, and then any others that wish to come forward. Got it.
So we can
Understood.
reappoint,
Okay.
or we can just pick new folks. Any other current events or questions? All right, very good. So we'll conclude current events. Okay. Item number 8, presentation by Matt Weatherly of the FY 2024 Classification and Compensation Study results for the town of Carefree by public sector personnel consultants, and review, discussion, and possible action to approve Resolution 2024-03, accepting the report results and making it a public record.
Very good. Mr. Mayor, members of council,
Oh,
you
I
ready
have
for
a
me?
few things to say beforehand.
go for it.
Although I appreciate you being so anxious. So just to review, during the last budget cycle, we had a lot of discussion about compensation. And so as a result of that, we thought it's only right to just get ourselves calibrated, figure out where we stand relative to the marketplace. And we want to do right by our employees and right by our town. We don't want to overpay or underpay. So with that in mind, we decided to search out a consultant to help us do basically a job classification and a compensation study. And so to kick that off, I had 2 people join me in that effort. One is Sharon Smith. She's a resident of our town. And so Sharon actually wrote her doctoral thesis on compensation and a book about compensation. And she was a big player, very much involved when AT&T was broken up and figuring out compensation plans at that time for AT&T. We also had Councilman Michael Johnson participate. So Mike Johnson, nearly 40 years of work as a CFO in startup companies, high-tech startup companies, Fortune 500 companies, and public companies. So we wanted somebody to help vet those consultants which step forward. So we put out a request for qualifications in RFQ. We got 3 responses. So the 3 of us went through them, and we selected PSPC, the Public Sector Personnel Consultants. And that's Matt's company. So why did we select them? One, they're based in Arizona. They've done a lot of work with small and large communities in the state of Arizona, Cave Creek, Paradise Valley, Scottsdale, Apache Junction, Maricopa. They've done over 100 AZ, Arizona public employers they've reviewed. And we thought he would bring the most knowledge and background to what we needed to accomplish. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt. Thank you for coming.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Brief presentation. Mayor teed it up, pretty cleanly and succinctly in terms of how we arrived here. We have had the good fortune to work with quite a few public employers throughout the United States, home base for all of our staff. I get to be the pretty face, so it's not just the Matt show, but public sector personnel consultants, we have full-time staff that do about 70 of these a year. A little bit less travel. Excited to kind of drive here instead of fly here, so I'll keep my remarks fairly brief and highlight our study findings. We initiated in early December by meeting with each staff member to review their job description. We do have some minor title modifications that we would propose. So, if and when we shift to a now what, portion of this evening will be kind of the findings of our work. Not any real action to be taken per se, other than to perhaps accept those findings. But in reviewing job descriptions, to ensure that when we make our market comparisons, we're doing so based on actual job duties. Now, the challenge of any employer, public or private, that frankly has fewer than maybe 300 to 400 employees, is that your staff wears a lot of hats. Those comparisons out in the market, while ideal, are never succinctly perfect one for one. The city, the town, competes with agencies large and small in the immediate area. So we worked to define a market for that. The great majority of your employees, live or came from within commuting distance of the town. I think it's very important that we recognize that, in as much that there's competitors and there's comparators. Comparators might be a little bit more like us in terms of either population, services, staffing levels. Competitors might be the bullies, whether they're down the street or a couple miles away. They have more openings, they have more jobs, they have more positions, and they love to take people that have a pretty broad job assignment. They love to take people that have a resume that says, well, it might state that I'm a maintenance technician, or it might state that I was the accountant, but here's the other 8 things that I did, or the other 18 things that I did on my job description. So that kind of gets baked into this cake a little bit when we make those market comparisons. We collected job descriptions, organization charts, salary plans, some high-level benefits notes from the comparison agencies that kind of represent a pretty localized model. Frankly, it's a challenge always to define a market, but through the kind of the understanding of where people come from, where we have lost people to, and certainly where people drive from, we landed on this list. There are certainly some big players on this list. We had to be very cautious, less so at the line staff level. Frankly, I would probably state that your line employees that are not supervisors or managers are doing as much or more than the employees that are in some of the larger cities that are on this list. Scottsdale, for example, has 22 people that do one thing. you have 3 people in your public works department and they kind of do everything, right? So thank you. So that just kind of sets a little bit of the tone for going into something that seems pretty simple, right? But is a little bit more than that when we ponder or at least consider job duties, job responsibilities, what lands on a job description. In our experience, public employers are terrible at telling residents no. Like, no, we don't do that. So we figure out, okay, yes, we'll do that. Great, staff, how do we figure out how do we do this, right? How do we add this? Who can take it on? Who has the background or who can learn? And then we'll go say, yes, we can do this, kind of thing. We did not get into a deep dive on staffing, but we did look at some of the smaller communities on this list and removed public safety, removed utilities, and looked at staffing levels to say, okay, per capita, how many staff do we have per 1,000 residents? Well, Carefree has about 4 staff per 1,000 residents. The smaller agencies on this list, the Cave Creeks, the El Mirages, the Fountain Hills, Litchfield, they have about 5.5 employees per 1,000, okay? So you're pretty lean, right? That's not a bad thing, but that also starts to shape some of the now what that we'll have perhaps at a later conversation. But the now what being, where do we want to position ourselves and how do we defend, justify, and sustain a salary plan? What is the appropriate wage and benefit to provide each of our staff in light of, right? And in light of what's being paid in the market and what's being offered in the market job by job. So we did that analysis. Also in light of what other factors might influence the town's ability to recruit and to retain. Performance expectations, certainly the abundance of localized competition, any other factors that, on a going basis influence turnover, recruitment efforts, a desire, ability, and intent to pay on some type of conservative to aggressive sliding scale, okay? We also included private sector data where appropriate. You do have some positions that have finance responsibilities, IT responsibilities, certainly your public works folks. There's some portability there between the public sector and the private sector. So we looked at not only these communities and their job descriptions, and that's the great benefit of looking at the public sector. They have job descriptions, published salary plans, budget documents, organization charts, very, very transparent. So we tend to stay in our lane of public sector work. But we also utilize some published survey data from Economic Research Institute to help inform or at least enlighten any movement or pattern that may exist in the private sector. Certainly people with certifications, you're adjacent to some of those, right? You've got a partnership with a utility and a water utility. There are private utility districts around. They're excellent at stealing people that have or can get and keep certifications because they're all enterprise fund money, right? And it's, kind of like when we go through the drive-through. It costs more, cool, we'll charge more, right? That's kind of that private sector mindset. So we want to at least acknowledge for those positions that have some portability. Not every job has a private sector equivalent, over into the public sector, but we looked at that data as well. At a very high level, the first thing that we do is largely a paper exercise, and that is comparing salary ranges. Local governments have formal salary plans. They classify all of their jobs onto salary ranges that have a minimum, that have a maximum. What does vary from community to community is if some of those communities have steps where they move people just kind of automatically through a step plan. Those agencies might have 5 steps, 15 steps, 25 steps, or they may have an open range scale, which is similar to Carefree's, with a minimum, a maximum. I'm going to calculate a midpoint, right? The midpoint gives me my bearings to try and offset that volatility of how wide or how narrow each community's pay structures and pay ranges might be. Now that feels like that's down in the minutia, but it helps inform some of our findings. Our findings, again, are kind of a paper exercise. They can become anecdotal very quickly, but we compare midpoints, right? So we look at job descriptions, we vet out comparable job duties for each of your classifications. About half of the jobs that we surveyed, just better than half, look pretty good. We're competitive for about half of the positions that we surveyed. We're more than 5% behind market on paper in those pay ranges for about the other half. So just better than a 50-50 split where 56% of the jobs are competitive, 44% are sliding a little bit behind. The pay ranges can be adjusted. You know, they can be adjusted with or without consideration for actual employee salaries. Ideally, I want to see your journey level competent performers reach the middle of that range in a pretty succinct manner. 5 to 7 years maybe on the outside. I want to make sure that I leave room for a new hire, perhaps lower in the pay range, a star performer, a long tenured individual, a little bit higher in the pay range. But the goal is to ensure that I think our goal is to align our pay ranges to market averages. Now, I pause there because there's a possibility or a future discussion around philosophy. You know, what is it, or what is our intent or our stated strategy? Do we want to pay at market average, right? So define market, then define average, job by job. So about half of your pay ranges look pretty good right now. Half of them are a little bit behind. You know, nothing leaps off the page and saying, wow, we're way behind. But I will say, reality also wins. Positions like your engineer that go vacant for a while when you post it, it's very difficult to find those folks, right? They can be disruptive internal equity-wise, even their market value compared to maybe how the organization wishes to value, or reporting relationships can be a little bit disruptive. There are also instances where two things can be true at the same time. I may say, oh, your range for engineer looks great, and you might tell me, great, it's been vacant for 2 years, or 1 year, or 9 months, or that kind of thing. So two things can definitely be true at the same time, but reality also wins there, and I would defer to staff a little bit with respect to any experiences that they've had with either turnover or refilling positions as they become vacant. We looked at benefits at a very high level. Benefits as a percentage of total compensation trend right around 30% in the public sector. That slides around a little bit. When you have police and fire, which you don't, when you have police and fire, that number grows to about 36, 38%. So benefits, pension contributions, those kinds of things bring that number up a little bit. By comparison, the private sector hovers about 26, 27%. So you're wildly in line, at least with the agencies that we compared you to with respect to, you know, paid time off, leave benefits, you know, what you're allocating for benefits as a percentage of your total compensation. So similar to an audit, I don't have a ton of findings in that, you know, necessarily category. And then I mentioned really, you know, that middle bullet point here. You're running a little bit lean, 4 residents per 1,000, or 4 employees per 1,000 residents, up against about 5.5, at least in those smaller communities. That's a little bit anecdotal because every agency's budget, management style, service level expectations, age of infrastructure, you can pour a lot into that conversation when we look at staffing and really kind of unbundle service delivery. And then that last bullet is really just kind of a futuring. As you start to look at the budget, it remains extremely appropriate to budget for salary increases within your adopted salary ranges. The data that we have presented in our brief memo can absolutely be utilized to reset those pay ranges that have fallen behind market. That is a consideration. That is not, I don't believe at this point, a recommendation or something to take action on. But as you budget for salaries, being able to express to employees, hey, we value you, the market values you, here's what we value out of what you bring, you know, to the town, whether that's education, experience, performance, consequence, autonomy, you know, all of the above. But you know, you put these things together to kind of identify an overall market strategy or a market philosophy. We would propose at least being at market average. So those positions that survey a little bit more than 5% behind market, you could start to see a little bit of pay range movement. But nobody's going to fall out of the bottom of those ranges if you readjust, you know, to market. Really, the intent behind that is obviously to be fair for retention of current employees, but also to be realistic around when we do post a vacancy, or when we do have somebody that's either retirement eligible or moves on or gets a promotion, that we have a competitive pay range to post on our job description for that vacancy. With that, I will defer either to staff if there are further comments, or to you, Mr. Mayor, and the committee that we had a chance to work with.
Okay, well done. Nice presentation. Sharon Smith, you're welcome to sit next to Mr. Neese if you have any comments to. As we move forward, you're welcome to speak up. Any comments or questions from council?
Mayor, this is Mike Johnson.
Go ahead.
what was striking about this study was 44% of employees being under the midpoint. And I looked at the ranges, and it ranged from 6% under to almost 13% under. When you look at the ones that were over, that ranged from about 1.4 to close to 5%. Now, we had some outliers, 2 outliers that were about 6 and 9% over. But in the end, when I look at the study and harken back to my professional life, this type of study is exactly what we did in little companies, big companies, and et cetera. And we also were able to obtain outside data because I was in finance. We see studies from Robert Half, Heidrick & Struggles, Russell Reynolds, and other financial type recruiters. We had engineering people that we'd look at. But in the end, we always looked at the midpoint and where were people and what was our retention factor. The thing that we always concluded was it's very expensive to have turnover. And to recruit certain people with high-level skills, which where I was, were engineers in particular, during the dot-com bubble, when competition was intense, was always an issue. In our case, of course, we didn't look at the private sector as a comparator. However, when you look at the region and how we selected the comparables, I think it made sense. It didn't make sense to go outside where somebody had to move out of state or move hundreds of miles away for a position, because this is where we live and this is where we work. So in the end, I think the study was fair, it was well done, and it gives us a lot to think about.
And I would second that. When we were setting pay scales for actually setting the guidelines to bargain pay for approximately 300,000 workers throughout the United States for AT&T, that's the approach we took, to look at what were the prevailing wages for labor and product market competitors. In most instances, these were other private firms, but it was the approach we took at AT&T. And when I did studies looking at federal, state, and local government workers, we were looking at labor and product market competitors and what those individuals with that set of characteristics could command in their local market.
So local market was always a factor.
Yes, absolutely.
I have a question for Dr. Smith. So we already had a general idea that our staff were working within a competitive range anyway. How did we place a value on years of experience or coming in with the types of experience or performance of other duties within? So in other words, as he said, wearing multiple hats. Was that taken into consideration with this study?
Well, with the individuals, that would position them in a particular place within the range. That if you came in with a significant level of experience, you wouldn't be hired at the minimum. And it would explain why some people might be above the maximum, considerably above the maximum. Even though your goal is to pay to the midpoint, you recognize that some people have more experience, some people have more requirements on the job. The difficulty, as we know with this kind of a survey, this study, is we've got a really thin group of individuals. It's very different to look at 300,000 people across the United States versus this very small set of people within one labor market area. So, but you will expect not everybody will be at the minimum, not everybody will be at the midpoint or the max. It'll depend on their experience and what they contribute to the job. But what is true for everyone is there is a huge cost if someone is significantly underpaid, captured by another employer, and you have to replace them.
Could we perhaps put a dollar value on losing one person over the amount of time to train a new person or skill sets coming in? for a particular position?
Yeah,
1 year's pay?
Yeah, easily, because even if you hire someone, you find someone, you hire them, maybe they are new to the job and they may be hired at the minimum. Even with a lot of experience, that it'll take them a while to learn the ways of this particular entity. So they're not gonna walk in the job and immediately be at the effectiveness and efficiency level you would expect after some months, depending on the level of the job. It may take longer or a shorter period, depending on the skill level, but they're not gonna come in and be absolutely at the ultimate efficiency and effectiveness the first day on the job.
Thank you.
So Matt, we just talked about,
Vince, go ahead.
about,
Vince, this is Mike.
go ahead, Mike.
To answer your question, we always figured it cost about a year's salary to bring somebody up to speed. And that pretty much proved to be true over the years.
Thanks, Mike.
So Matt, so part of your task was to look at our job descriptions. So we have job descriptions for every position. You interviewed our staff and you made sure that they were in that, or if the job description was short, or if it was needed to be added to. So when you go to other communities and compare, did you find that there's, especially in small towns, are there a lot of likes, I mean, similarities, or did you have to use some, I don't know, poetic license to make things fit, or what?
Yeah, I think the larger organizations, there's always a fallacy that, bigger is more organized. That's not necessarily, the case. We're always at the mercy of the date, of those job descriptions on those other communities. We're in the middle of our third study for Scottsdale. We just wrapped up a study for Cave Creek, and we just wrapped up a study for Paradise Valley. So we had the luxury of knowing a little bit more than we normally would have about those jobs and those job descriptions in some of the comparison communities. The smaller ones do match up in a way, but there's some very uniquely blended positions, in Carefree. You have a gentleman that has one hat in finance and one hat in IT. That's a pretty unique, blend. The public works positions, I think, as well, extend into, in a larger community, some more specialized job descriptions. And so you kind of have to reach across to say, wait, you're also doing facilities. Wait, you're also grading the side of the road. Wait, you're also, messing with natural gas or lamps or, that kind of thing, right? It's very broad. And so in those larger communities, you see some specialized job titles, some specialized job descriptions, less so in a smaller community that is a little bit more, kind of a catch-all, where we're employing generalists rather than specialists.
Did you find through the interview process that our job descriptions are accurate?
Yeah, we've got some working notes, some things that we can just kind of update, modestly. I believe the staff, on a going basis reviews their job descriptions with their supervisors, which is very, very common and a healthy, exercise to ensure that, even if there's mutual understanding of performance expectations, those kinds of communication that occurs kind of naturally between an employee and a leader, that, those don't get too far afield. But we've got some working notes, on those, so it wouldn't take much to kind of do a track changes and make a few updates here and there.
Okay, well, thank you. Any other questions from council members?
Yes, if I may.
Hatcher.
On the job descriptions here, I think there was a variance of 5%. Is that fairly standard in the industry? It's
As
not
far as
broader than that?
As far as defining a within market?
You said 56% fell within
Yeah.
the range, plus or minus 5%. That seemed kind of narrow, but that may be the case.
Yeah, and it is an industry standard, at least for us. I try not to be like Peter Pan, like I do this so much and it's so much on paper. The reality, certainly over the last 18 months, has been the volatility of inflation, where a lot of agencies have thrown 4 to 8% on top of their pay scales over and over again. We are kind of fortunate in a way where we're straddling really kind of that magic July 1 date. However, the last 2 years, a lot of public agencies in Arizona provided more than one salary increase for their staff in reaction to inflation. So We did not age the data. We did not push the data forward past July 1. If we were to do that, I think I would be applying about 3.5% to give you an idea of how much inflationary anticipation there would be for the balance of 2024. But we have, as a standard, typically used plus or minus 5%, just to give us that room for that occasional mid-year adjustment that might have occurred that we missed like 2 weeks after we pulled the data or that kind of thing, so.
Thank you, Matt. And just a comment I had when I sold one of my houses, I had the utility company come out and turn off the gas. And then I realized I need to have that gas on for additional inspection. So I asked the individual if he would turn the gas on, and he replied, "No, I can't do that. I'm just a gas turner offer. I'm not a gas turner oner." So that was a very specific job description. And by a larger enterprise, I always thought that was entertaining. But
Yes. Yeah, well, people take for granted, right? Even, it's certainly in local government, all of the positions have very specific requirements, a specific set of knowledge, skills, certifications in many instances, that become a commodity, right? And, depending on how long it's been or how long you go in between surveys, over and over flat adjustments, eventually we get it right for some positions, even by happy accident, but we fall behind for others. And so those positions that start to slip a little bit behind market, it is important that we look at market data periodically. Public sector, probably every 5 to 7 years. The last 2 years have been extraordinary, so take the last 2 years out. And I think it's very healthy to look at survey data every 5 to 7 years. The League, of Cities puts out a salary survey every year. That can at least be used as a side course. I don't tend to use it as a main dish just because it gets dated really, really quickly. And it is more of a benchmark study. It's a little bit more generic, but that's not a bad resource either, just to ensure that we're keeping in touch, especially with those core service positions that are frontline staff, your public works tech, your code enforcement officer, your court clerk, those positions that I would say everyone has, with the asterisk that, smaller communities, they're a little bit more than that, so.
And just in closing, just
Go right ahead.
that I know there was a lot of laughter when we were talking about job descriptions and duties early when we had everybody coming up making their presentation, the respective responsibilities within the town. But there's no doubt through this study and your assessments that our staff is small, and all kidding aside, they do wear a lot of hats.
Yep.
And we have to appreciate it. But they may be in that middle range with respect to their salary. But, there's no doubt they're providing more than what we're paying them for in general. So I just wanted to, people to recognize that they work pretty hard and do a great job.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, so for those who don't know, I believe this is the first time we've ever had such a study done.
Yeah.
And doing it, every 7 years or so is probably money well spent, just to make sure we're doing everything right and treating everyone correctly. I do have a question about when you go out to a municipality, so you go to Cave Creek or Paradise Valley, and you ask them for data. What do they give you? How does it work?
Yep. Yeah, so, those public entities are subject, to open records requests. They have some time to acknowledge the request and some time to fulfill, the request. My favorite ones are the ones that also send us a bill for copying, even if it's emailed to us. None of your comparators were in that situation this time. They provide to us adopted salary plan, typically, which is either by ordinance included in the budget or at the very minimum a personnel manual item, where they are very specifically providing us the 2024 adopted salary ranges for all their classifications. Their budget documents are typically online. We take advantage of those to gain access to organization charts, understanding of staffing levels in each department, reporting relationships, and then the job descriptions. Thanks to online providers like NeoGov and governmentjobs.com, an overwhelming majority of public agencies spill their job descriptions out to it. It is intended to be a recruitment platform, but it also houses all of their job descriptions. And so that gains us access to those important bullet points that describe job duties and responsibilities, knowledge, skills, and certifications and experience required, so that we can say this is an adequate enough match for me to put this job on a piece of paper, with the background data saying, okay, here's the 8 communities that have or reported a court clerk. here's what their salary minimum is, their salary maximum is, we calculate a midpoint. But then we turn around and offer to all of the participants a copy of the survey as well. So even though it is all public information and quite frankly readily duplicated, they can see some of that aggregated data as a participant, as well. So we tend to go with a soft knock on the door rather than the big formal open records request that, invariably bounces around from the clerk's office to the attorney to the HR department. And then the city manager's like, well, why didn't you give it to him 2 weeks ago? It's like, wait, we can do this kind of through professional channels, HR to HR. So we tend to do it, that way. And then just so happened, right, that we've had a chance to work with a couple of these survey communities in the last 3 to 5 years. And a couple of them are active now where we're doing some survey work, some full classification, renovation work. So got a little bit of an insight, kind of fun as a local firm to do some local work, so.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council?
Hi, thanks for your presentation. Can you clarify on your midpoint methodology when you went to the 9 cities and towns? Did you use the midpoint for each one and then take an average of them? Or did you overweight, underweight, larger towns, smaller towns, or what about that?
Yeah, so we did exactly what you described. Taking the minimum and maximum and dividing by 2 to reach a midpoint. Taking the average of those midpoints unweighted, right? So at the line staff level, I would certainly contend those job comparisons are pretty solid. The higher up we go, we have to be cautious. So we might be looking at your engineer up against somebody's deputy or somebody's second in command or something like that. So some of the communities have an engineering director that's paid north of $200,000. That's a little bit different and maybe out of context for your classification or your position. To throw one more wrinkle in, at that management level, not all managers have a pay range out in the market. Sometimes it's just an actual salary. They're at will. They're not classified onto a pay range. So we are a little bit at the mercy of time and job, the ability to negotiate. Those actual salaries are a little bit more volatile. I don't think we had too many actual salary data points in our market, but I mentioned that because it is a possibility. But the average of those midpoints to create a prevailing rate from the public sector, we did weight 50-50 up against the private sector. So an example like that public works maintenance technician, average of those 8 or 9 communities and a prevailing rate, and then look at the private sector and try to find some comparable positions. Within that, we've got a construction worker, we've got a facilities maintenance worker, we've got a couple of other data points. But I'm creating an individual weighted 50-50 private sector line, and then just taking the simple average of those two. So public plus private divided by 2. You could lean into it, I think in one direction or the other. Before we did that, certainly I try not to fuzzy up, the math too much and just say, okay, simple averages, because it is all public information and the ranges are out there. I think it's something that, if we got to it where we had to, communicate our findings and defend them, like to the employees, to a taxpayer, that kind of thing, it's all, data that's readily accessible, out in the market.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank Dr. Smith and Councilmember Johnson for stepping forward and working on this study with you, Matt. How long did this take?
Really, you're looking at just 60 days. It was 45 to 60 days. We were fortunate that we were able to move fairly quickly and that it was local. So really, we jumped in right away in early December, met with staff, made notes on the job descriptions and did the survey work all really within the month of December and early January, to arrive here. So.
I know that there had been some criticisms from residents that our staff made too much money, that we could shake some people loose, we could do this, do that, and I think this study obviously validated the fact that they're in many cases they're underpaid for the work that they do. So.
Yeah, and I think I would go one further to kind of put a cap on that. We did not look at your actual salaries within the ranges, but they're all within the ranges. Right, so our focus was really a paper exercise of range to range, job description to job description. But the now what part, could include or should include where are people in our ranges compared to how long they've been with us. So are people achieving the midpoint? Are they moving through the pay range? what triggers a move to the pay range versus what triggers a move to an actual salary. Objectively, certainly as a third party, that's kind of the idea. It gives you arm's length where, we're not going to be in a position to review somebody's performance or, aptitude or, anything like that. And so it is expressing the value of a job from don't pay less than, don't pay more than, and a lot of those ranges, even if it's more than 5%, if I use 10%, plus or minus 10%, we're there. All right. I've got no jobs that are more than 10% ahead, and I've got maybe one job that's more than 10% behind. So we're there. So if employee salaries are within those ranges, I would say keep doing what you're doing. Periodically look at the market, continue to budget for salary increases within those ranges. That's appropriate.
Thank you.
Just one more.
Sure.
In finance, you would normalize data against the revenue, sales revenue, or balance sheet values. Do you normalize the data relative to the size of the town, the population, or the revenue that the town, tax revenue would derive? What base parameters do you use to try and compare us relative to
Sure.
Scottsdale, so it's more comparable?
Yeah, we did it at the job match level instead, right? So, for example, your court administrator, not to pick on any one position, city clerk, you name it. Those are a little bit more size sensitive. I've got to be cautious about what job I compare that to in Scottsdale. And so I didn't reach across and say, what does Scottsdale City's clerk make and what does your town clerk make, right? I looked for a more comparable position within the city clerk infrastructure that might be a level down from that. That's different than the line staff. I would defend all day long that your public works technician is doing as much or more as Scottsdale's public works maintenance worker, kind of thing. So we did not do any adjustment, to the data other than to be very cautious about what level we matched at that senior level and above, at that manager level. And you've got a handful of them, right? A P&Z administrator, town administrator, the engineer position, which is not quite a management position, but it's more than, your staff engineer, I think, in Scottsdale. And then what's my other one? I mean, your foreman in public works, your supervisor, they're leaders, right? Your building official, I think, which is, another one that I would be, I was cautious, at what level we made that comparison. But we didn't shove it down, through the revenue process. And I would say at the employee level, I try to avoid it simply because they don't care how you pay, they just care how much, right? And so, and I don't want to oversimplify that, by any stretch, because I do recognize there are always limits to, finding that intersection of ability and intent to pay at a certain level, which is why, we don't have before you, firm recommendations on, adjust this range, adopt this range, provide this adjustment, spend this amount of money. I would love to be part of that conversation if and when that conversation needs to occur, simply because it remains appropriate within the pay ranges that we have to keep doing those salary adjustments. If they're meeting or exceeding your expectations, the employees, then, we're not overdoing it anywhere, right? Want to make sure we're not underdoing it or overdoing it, maybe to the mayor's point early on.
Any other?
Oh, sorry.
Go right
Yeah.
ahead.
So I think it's important to, just something that I have thought about for quite a while is that when you look at Phoenix and Scottsdale, they're really kind of like the price setters, and all of the smaller towns are
Tempe, too.
the price takers. And so we have to deal with the reality of being in the Phoenix MSA
Yep.
and deal with the reality of it.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I would say be marginally grateful. I don't know, how much you have to pay MCSO, but being in public safety is not a cheap thing. Certainly. Being in the utility business is also a highly competitive, thing. We do 20 to 30 studies a year in the Metroplex of Dallas. There are 60 cities within 2 hours, and they all try to be in the top 5. They're wildly competitive, and that's the same way here. You mentioned MAG earlier. I try to avoid, MAG meetings because there's council members from multiple cities and towns in the same spot. And here I am talking about comp, and then they get going like, "What are you doing, to me on police officer, or why are you paying this much on your dispatcher, or whatever?" It's very, very competitive, and Tempe lives to beat out Scottsdale, and Scottsdale wants to beat out Phoenix, and right. So they all have an adopted philosophy that says, okay, give me market or give me market plus 5, and kind of the sheer reality. And unfortunately, you live in a fishbowl in the public sector as well. So it's no secret, what everybody offers. Best case, you've got billboards up that say, hey, Phoenix, come work in Paradise Valley as a police officer. Those types of things happen all of the time, and it's getting a little bit more ruthless than probably it was, so.
And if I could add, again, even if Phoenix and Scottsdale set the market, the smaller towns cannot significantly underpay the market, or they will continually lose employees and go through those turnover costs and affect the quality of life and the services that the town can offer.
You end up being like a training university for big towns. Okay, other comments from council?
Yeah, Matt, this is Mike. I'd just like to point out, we're declaring 7 people to be comparable, 7 people below and 2 above. But, in looking at the numbers, just pure numbers to numbers, there's only 2 people in the town that are above the midpoint. I mean, everybody's below the midpoint, 14 people, unless I'm not reading this chart right.
Nope, you are correct.
So I just wanted to make that clear. Nobody's getting rich there.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Certainly not council.
Yeah, certainly not us. Okay, so hearing no additional comments, we'll open up to public comment. So for those who have submitted a slip for public comment on this agenda item number 8, we just invite you to come up to the podium, state your name and address, and speak for, limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. So Mr. John Mattis.
I appreciate what Councilman Johnson has done, Dr. Smith. This is an important thing for salary surveys for employees. Having worked in the public sector for longer than I want to admit, I was on 5 negotiating teams. What I have a problem with, I've never worked and gotten a salary survey that did not include benefits. I realize that was covered with a 30% mark. That's not necessarily factual. Depends on what position it's at, depends on how long you've been, depends on what your compensation package is as far as, do you get family health insurance? Do you get medical retirement? What retirement plan are you at? There are different levels, and I'm sure you'll find that in Arizona. It depends on, there was something called 3% at 50 for law enforcement, California. Well, it got expensive. They reduced that to 2.5% at 55. Those things add up, and it goes towards a salary. Complete compensation, total compensation. There's a marketing compensation firm, Perlmeyer. They have 8 locations in the United States. They did a great paper on 5 reasons why you need a salary survey. But it broke down, it's in the last line. In addition, in conclusions to similar job descriptions, information on, quote, total compensation that includes retirement plans, bonuses, incentives, and base salary ensure the information is relevant for your employee population. For example, some companies may pay lower salaries, but have generous short and long-term incentives. There is not an understanding that lower salary rate without reviewing the corresponding data. That's my problem with the study that was done, and I understand he was only contracted for a salary and also classification. So that's where that, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, that line came 30% for benefits. But that's my only bugaboo about this, and I don't think it's fair for employees also. Might be a better package if you also compared benefits. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. So that is our one, we only had one submittal for public comment, so we'll close public comment on this issue. So Matt, can you, while you're here, just talk about, how'd you arrive at the statement that benefit spending is in line with comparison agencies at about 30% of payroll costs?
Yeah, as mentioned, we were not asked to do a full benefits analysis. When we do those, we're typically looking at who pays what for health insurance for employees and dependents, paid time off accruals. Pension generally is pretty stable in this state as far as who contributes, if you're in Arizona State Retirement System. Other elements of compensation that would start to emerge might be, ad pay, certification pay for your public works folks, some specialized certification pay for your engineer, even for your code enforcement officer. Court is also coming into its own for cert pay and ad pay. But as mentioned, we did not collect that information. We asked each community to provide us with their total salary spend, their total benefit spend, and requested that as a percentage to ensure that it wasn't skewed in one direction or the other. Certainly what would be, I think, a remarkable finding would be, for example, if you said that we spend 30% and another community said they spent 35 or 40, I would start to be concerned because we have the majority of positions surveying a little bit low to market. When we look at, and I don't want to even guess, at this point, but you could start to add columns together to say, okay, are we competitive on benefits? Are we covering some ground somewhere where we're, suddenly paying an exorbitant amount, that employees are both valuing, using, and benefiting from, that's covering that position that's 6% behind? I don't know, right, until I do that, analysis.
Mayor, members of the council, we simply don't provide the benefits that Mr. Mattis has alluded to. We don't have retirement, medical, we don't have bonuses or incentives. But if that's the direction that council or Mr. Mattis wants to explore, certainly we can explore that. But it's a one-to-one ratio as far as benefits. It's health insurance and retirement. That's it.
Gary, retirement is standard.
Yes.
Retirement is standard across public service employees in the state of Arizona. It's 12.25%, whatever it is, across the board for everybody.
Won't change the math on that, I don't.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
And that's why I say it's basically one-to-one, is all these public agencies are essentially offering the same package. They're in the same insurance pools. There's a couple different insurance pools. I'm on the board of one of them, Raggett, represents all the rural communities within the state of Arizona for the most part. And then Arizona State Retirement. There is some PTO, personal time off. Larger communities offer a more robust program than the smaller communities. So there's some difference there with personal time off. But we simply don't provide those rich packages that these larger communities do.
Yeah, I think the retirement benefits are all standardized for every employee in the town, and the healthcare benefits are standardized for everyone as well in the
Yes.
same pool.
Yes.
Well, to be in those pools tells you so much more than probably what we could even, collect. The big delta really from employer to employer is who's paying what for dependent. Everybody's paying 100% of the employee, health insurance. Some are paying 100% of the dependent. Where suddenly we have a $20 an hour job and the benefits are another $18 an hour because it's $27,000 a year to put dependents on a health insurance plan. I know as a self-employed individual what I pay for my dependents, and I would, I'm kicking myself for not going into the public sector myself 25 years ago. But to be able to borrow on Gary's wealth of knowledge and exposure makes all the sense in the world to not necessarily, this was not an intentional oversight, right? We're coming from a position of knowledge, knowing what we know, that we're one for one on, at least pension and health insurance. Things dwindle after that. Anything that we have to offer could go up from a paid time off standpoint, from some additional certification incentives, even some education incentives that might exist. We'll leave aside the executive compensation packages with, $800 a month of cell phone and auto allowance in Scottsdale and Phoenix, and $25,000 of deferred comp across Tempe, Scottsdale, Phoenix, those larger agencies. Your total comp number, is going to take any job that we're surveying at 5 to 7% behind and push it to maybe 12 to 18% behind, depending on the level of job that we're talking about. So. It can be done. The data, can be done. I'm pretty rare to see change come out of a benefit survey, portion of it. However, I would never want to get out in front of asking the employees too, what do they value, right? You have finite resources. Are we spending them in the right spot? Are we expressing value to you as the employee? Are we spending on the things that you want, that you would, use, that you would, see as a benefit? Because I think I would put that almost or equal to going and getting the data from the market, is what do we have, what do we offer, what do others offer, what do you value, as a workforce? I think that's an important part too.
And I think it's important to note that we don't have a public safety team in our community. And I think that the higher volatility and the larger numbers for unfunded pension liabilities are in the PSPRS, not the ASRS.
I would agree. No, thank you all.
No, thank you, Matt. Any other comments or questions from the council?
Yes, this is Councilman Johnson. Matt, as you recall, during our deliberations of what to compare, and in talking with Gary Neese, we concluded that it would not be practical to try and compare benefit packages to all these other communities, but we concluded that we were probably somewhat comparable, other than different allowances or paying for dependents for health insurance and that type of thing. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
So excluding that and just looking at salaries, I think was, at least in my opinion, and I think Sharon agrees, was the best approach.
Yeah, and this is Sharon. I absolutely agree it was the best approach.
Okay.
Any
Thank
other
you.
additional comments? So hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2024-03. So what this means is that we are accepting the report. That's all. So this resolution 2024-03 is a resolution of the mayor and the town council of the town of Carefree, Arizona, accepting the fiscal year 2024 classification and compensation study by public sector personnel consultants and making it a public record.
Motion to approve Resolution 2024-03, accepting the report results and making it a public record.
Second.
Any other comments from council? So hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and Matt, thank you for a good job.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
And as you move forward, we might have some more additional questions for you.
Yep, we'll be available.
Okay, thank you. Item number 9, review, discussion, and possible action to approve the road closure for the All Porsche Grand Display Car Show, March 3rd, 2024. Mr. Popopek.
Mayor, Council, thank you for considering this road closure. Before I get started, we have a couple folks here from the Porsche Club of America, the Arizona chapter, who run the event. Now, Dennis, you want to do a quick introduction of the event?
Right. Let's put a couple of these up here where people can take what they like. We had a very good show last year. We appreciate it. It's having been approved to have it. It's an ideal location. So we'll see what it is. This year we're going to have it on March 3rd.
Sir, could you speak into the microphone?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So this year, last year we had it on March 5th, which is the first Sunday in March, and this year we'll have it on March 3rd. Last year we had 77 cars, and this year we have figured out we can have over 100. It is open to the public, it's free. We do put some donation tubs around because any profits after expenses will go to the Mesa Community College Auto Technology Program for scholarships. If Carefree had such a place, we'd donate it here. But we found that looking around the valley, it's got the probably best program to train people to go into the auto repair and so forth business. And so many people go to college, come out, and they don't know what to do with a job. There's a lot of need for skilled workers. And so being a car club, the largest in the world with 125,000 members and 2,500 here, and my home club in Seattle, I'm a rain bird, so I'm familiar with this weather, of about 3,500. the thing that's really great about it is that it's a very self-effacing club. Everybody is welcome, whether you got a $10,000 old beat up, whatever, or a $2 million car. Everybody is welcome. And same for the public. Anybody come up and see the events and see things, build camaraderie, just share the joy of having the cars and having some fun. So really appreciated Steve's help last year. In fact, in having put on car shows for 20 years in the Seattle area before becoming involved down here about 13 years ago when I came down for the winters. Never had anybody give us the kind of help that Steve did on the day and before and after. And that's saying a lot. So we really appreciate the partnership. Appreciate your letting us have it here. It's really an ideal location, and we'd like to have it again.
All right, so we might have a few questions for you before you go, though. I have a few questions. One, will there be any alcohol involved with the program?
Not that we're going to have. Somebody
Good.
walks out of a restaurant with one. I think that's up to the town
Any
to do
food-
whatever.
Any food
Yeah.
trucks?
Pardon me?
Food trucks or anything? You're going to serve coffee or?
No, no.
What are you doing?
No, in fact, usually we'll go around, we'll put some of these up, some smaller ones, and I'll go out, personally, I know when Steve encounters people, he'll give them something. And I understand from Steve and from talking to some of the business owners that they were very happy with the show last year. A couple of them even want to sponsor us this year. So it brought a lot of business in on a Sunday when it can be slow. So as far as, no, we're not, the only thing we're going to provide is coffee and pastries in the morning, so sugar and caffeine, which I think is allowed.
Yeah, we allow that.
Other than that, no. And I think the people looked on it as bringing, a large group of people in, kind of like the art things you have. So we got a lot of good feedback from last year, and I think we're doing a lot more publication this year. We've invited the Mountain Region up in Sedona and Flagstaff to participate. We've invited Tucson. We've invited the 356, which is the old car. They have their own club, and others to come. The only thing is they have to have a Porsche. That's why I call it the All Porsche Grand Display. When I started doing these up in Washington, they said, well, I got a friend with a Ferrari. He could come. I said, well, that'd be nice. But this is just for Porsches. Oh, but I got a friend with a Maserati. I said, no. This is a Porsche show. So I put all Porsche show, and then it becomes kind of clear. But you're going to see some great cars, have a great time. We don't do we do give awards. But we don't open doors, do any kind of really judging like you'd have at Pebble Beach or the Arizona Concours where I've been involved as well. Just those cars that stand out in several different groups. We'll give those awards away at 2 o'clock. Open the show at 9 with some comments, have some jazz playing from your system. Have our guys get cars and coffee and stuff. The core staff will wear a shirt like this. So if you have a problem, go to them. And then if you have something really you want to compliment us on, come to me. So I kind of run this show with my associate Bill back here, helped me put it on and does an awful lot of the physical work and the artwork and all this stuff. So it's a good time for the day. It's a fun thing to be out, and what a lovely place to have it.
Well, we're glad to have you. And you'll have more cars this year than last year, but the footprint is the same.
Yeah, the footprint's insane as far as blocking off the streets. We didn't quite take it all last year, but it was our first year having it. And prior at home, I put on 4 or 5 different shows a year. I've been putting this particular show on right on Lake Washington for 13 years, and so we have a lot of reputation for doing it. For here, it was the first year we did it. I think a lot of the public discovered it. We will put some smaller versions of this that I gave Steve on windshield and stuff of local residents. So please come and register. You don't have to be a member to be in the club, but yeah, we have room, we think, for about 110.
Okay. Well, it was a great event last year. It was fun, and I'm glad to see you're back. And Sunday is a painless day to
Yeah, I
close some
think that
streets
day
and
we don't
bring
get in
some.
the way of any parking that is really too obstructive. The restaurants are open. Some businesses are closed, but I think the restaurants appreciate that, because when they get here, we give them coffee and donuts, and then they got the rest of the day to talk to their friends, walk around, and go to the shops, have lunch. We don't provide them lunch, and then we finish up about 2:30 after awards. So we'll start loading the cars in about 7:30, be done by a little before 9, show opens to the public at 9, and we'll close everything in by 2:30 and be gone by 3.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions, comments?
Sounds good.
Great. Well, thank you, Dennis. Looking forward to it. Okay.
Hey, Mayor Council, I just want to say working with the Porsche Club has been great. They're like clockwork. They were in, they were out, It was probably one of the easiest events as far as being able to bring things and bring people in. All the trash was cleaned up. I mean, it was just, everything was just done top notch, and very, very happy to have them back again. And again, it's, you know, we talked to business last year, and they give them the option on Sunday if they want to open or not during the season. But we're not, you know, if the service businesses, they're mostly closed, so they won't be impacted. So this really works out. It's just such a win-win situation, such a good fit for the town. And so just so you see that it starts at 6 a.m. And the reason we start at 6 a.m., even though the event starts at 9, is that if we don't shut the roads down soon enough, people may come in, want to go to the gardens or whatever, and they'll park, and then all of a sudden these cars start coming in, and it's just become, so that's why we shut it down sooner than later. So we'll probably be there about 5:30 to get it started and be ready to go at 6.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Steve, for putting this together.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve the closure of Easy Street and Ho Hum Road from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. on March 3rd, 2024 for the All Porsche Grand Display.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Dennis. Oh, okay. I'll try to get that right by showtime. Okay, call to the public. Those wishing to address the council need not request permission in advance. The public may address the council on matters not on the agenda. At the conclusion of an open call to the public, individual members of the public body may respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the public body, may ask staff to review a matter, direct staff to study the matter, reschedule the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date, or may ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. However, the council may not discuss or take legal action at this time, so please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. And when you're called, please come up to the podium and state your name and address. And first up, Ariane Buser.
I might be the only one. Hi. Yes, Ariane Buser. Nice to see all of you again, Carefree resident. So there are actually 2 different things that I just wanted to bring up, and both of them to me are relevant topics. The first one is the issue of illegal aliens possibly coming to Carefree to reside in the hotel. And I know that the open border now, you cannot hide it. I mean, they are everywhere. And I think they're definitely here in Arizona, and they are in our area. They're in Scottsdale, Phoenix, and actually the illegals that attacked the New York cops this past week, they're now in Phoenix. So they're here. And a lot of governors have been allowing these illegals to come and stay in some of the empty rooms in the hotels in these communities. And you don't have to be a big city. They are also coming into the small communities, like small towns like we have. Even though we don't have services, that is definitely not a guarantee that they will not end up here. So, and actually I brought some things from the U.S. Constitution, which I'm not going to read, but if you go in there, there are a lot of statutes in there about aiding and abetting and harboring illegal aliens, and especially even one I found for commercial advantage or private financial gain. So there are actually penalties if you do that. So I highly encourage the town council to please let the owners of these hotels, and we have 3 in our area, as you all know, and they are not 100% occupied by regular, citizens, if you will. So there is no guarantee that illegals will not be put into these locations. So I highly urge the town council to please notify the owners of these hotel residences that allowing these illegals to come and stay is actually a federal offense, and that they should be forewarned of that. And especially, we know that illegals coming into communities, it increases theft, violent crime, petty theft, homelessness, drug use, you name it. And our town is not immune to these things. We've been fortunate so far, but that is no guarantee that it will not happen. So it's not even a matter of if it will happen, but when. And we need to be on notice. So please, as town council members, I highly encourage you to notify the hotel owners that this is a concern of residents. And I can't be the only one that is, just waiting for those people to show up at the hotel. Another thing that's also really important to me, I'm going to switch gears now to a happier topic, if you will. But I know the general plan is coming out for its final review, and I just want to highly encourage the town council to once again please consider having a commitment to open space preservation. I know that this is for quite a few residents in town, this is a high priority. And I just wanted to reiterate that when the draft comes out, that you do take into consideration the importance of open space preservation, specifically the 48 acres that we have here in Carefree that we would like to preserve from a grassroots effort and preserve it as a park for all to enjoy. There's actually numerous studies done, Arizona Forward Office of Tourism.
Oh, time is up.
Okay, just wanted to say, thank you. You can shut me off, that's fine, but it does help the community, so please, it's a legacy for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. John Mattis.
What I came to talk about was what I talked about last meeting. The state land sent a letter to the town, which was forwarded to town council, and within an hour, Lynn Hitchin got a copy of that, or actually got the notice of that, and supplied a public records request, which was, it's a public record, it's not confidential, was given. That person still hasn't stepped forward. Now, I spoke to Cheryl Croyer, Vice Mayor, and Gary Neese at the last January, one of January's farmers market, and we talked about this, and Vice Mayor Croyer came up and said it wasn't marked confidential, and I agree 100%. So what's the problem with the person that released that information undermining the mayor, undermining the council? What's the problem with coming forward and said, I did it? I don't know what that is, except it shows a major lack of character and integrity. It is an election year. Whoever's running for council, you're gonna have a problem. You might not have done it, but how are residents gonna know you didn't do it? Because nobody will step forward and say that. That's a problem. The other thing is, there,
You acknowledge it was released under a public records request, right? It
Oh, yes,
received
it
a
was.
public records.
Absolutely, I
Okay.
said there's no
Okay,
problem
I
with
just wanna
that.
make sure we're on the same page. Okay,
no problem
good,
with that.
thanks.
I'd like to get back my 10 seconds. The policy, the policy of code of conduct, 3L, says newly hired employees, elected officials will be briefed on this policy by the town administrator or town attorney and shall sign an acknowledgement after briefing and annually reaffirming that they have read and understand and will comply with the provisions of the code of conduct. Just ask yourself, when's the last time you signed one?
Just last
I don't
week.
know. That's good. If it's being done, that's great. Because my complaint has not been answered. That one has not been answered by anybody. And it's a policy in the preamble of this code of conduct. The preamble says the policy will be. If it's a policy, then why aren't you covering the policy? I asked Vice Mayor Croyer, if you're not following this policy, what policy do I not have to obey? Please tell me. It's not the way a town should work. It's not the way an employee or a town council person should work. And the Constitution does say, we the people. If you take a look at it, it's about 500 times the size. There's a reason for that.
Time is up, Mr.
No, I
Mattis.
understand. Thank you, but
Thank you.
was that my 10 minutes, 10 seconds back?
Okay, Ms. Stephanie Barber.
Stephanie Barber, Carefree resident. Everyone benefits if Carefree has a vibrant and prosperous town center, but we simply can't proclaim Carefree as a destination town. We have to actually create a unique destination that people will want to come to. Carefree has 3 strengths to leverage. We have a small town center. Everything is within very easy walking distance, but we have to make it a pedestrian-friendly town center where people can stroll leisurely around, slowing down to explore the shops and restaurants versus constantly being on guard and distracted by car traffic. We have a heritage. We have a story to tell. Many of the original buildings of downtown Carefree are charming. We need to selectively restore some of them to their original facades and emphasize the small, picturesque village appeal. Our star attraction could be the gardens. The town certainly advertises they are Carefree's star attraction, but multiple residents have gotten up at these council meetings and spoken about the awful state of the gardens. Even council members have quietly shared some concerns about the state of the gardens. Councilmember Miller and I learned just last week that 40% of the plant materials were removed from the garden. This is going in the complete opposite direction from the original concept of what these gardens were supposed to achieve. We should be restoring and even thinking of expanding the garden so that it is worthy of being called a destination, not systematically destroying the gardens. The gardens should wind throughout the town center. Shaded paths should lead people past shops and restaurants. Restaurant patios should nestle seamlessly into the gardens. By utilizing and enhancing a calming garden environment, we can significantly improve the pedestrian appeal and the safety of our town center. We can slow people down so they explore our shops on foot. And sandwich boards will not be necessary because the gardens can strategically highlight the shops and restaurants and actually lead people through the door. Carefree can become a must-see destination and still maintain the small-town charm residents value. But Carefree isn't going to become a destination by adding a few signs. Don't get me wrong. The Kimberly Horn signs that they've designed are classy and they're excellent quality. But we've already spent $400,000 on 2 gateway arches that were supposed to encourage people to come into Carefree, and everyone acknowledges that did not work. The only way to make Carefree a unique destination town is to create a unique place that people want to come. And that means making our town center pedestrian friendly, restoring the historic architecture, and enhancing our gardens versus destroying them. Then we can think about adding signs. Let me leave you with one very quick excerpt from a TripAdvisor of someone that just visited Carefree Gardens a few months ago and left feedback on the TripAdvisor. It says, "It is nice when a community can come together and provide a feature at no cost. However, this was just a typical, well-landscaped parking lot. This is
Time
not
is
a
up. Ms.
destination
Barber.
spot."
Thank you. Ms. Diane Roth.
Good evening, Council. Diane Roth, resident of Carefree. Just a couple brief things. One, I'm on the 40th anniversary committee. It's coming up quickly. I would think all of us should be out chatting it up to anyone we can, writing letters to the editor, maybe emphasizing how wonderful it is that we're 40 years. And I look at it as an opportunity for our town to unify behind something very happy. The other thing is I'm on the Carefree Park Board, and we're having a wonderful raiser, if I could find what fundraiser at Keeler's on Tuesday, March 19th. And I'm encouraging everyone to come and learn more about Carefree Park and what we're trying to do. And the third thing is just an observation on the money we just spent with the charming gentleman about the town and the compensation. And I was looking at the towns we were compared to, which are quite large and have huge budgets. One has $100 million in budget. We are 8.8 square miles. I would have loved to have seen a comparison of 10 towns with similar population and square mileage. I think it would have meant more to the town people if you compare like to like. We're not Scottsdale. We're not Phoenix. We're not Tempe. We're Carefree. We're 8.8 square miles. So maybe it would be nice when he does his final things, he has a little addendum saying towns our size actually spend X. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jeff Leader.
Hello, Council. My name is Jeff Leader, Cave Creek. I'm here asking to be compensated for damages I suffered as a result of lack of safety on the roads that you maintain. I have a photograph, maybe this would, if you can see this at all. The mayor earlier this evening told me, this is not a pothole, and you are not going to be compensated for damages suffered. I could have wound up in a hospital. Nobody seems to care. I've been here the last 6 months trying to get compensated, not for a lot of money. I didn't go to the hospital. Mr. Neese and Mr. Crane both said, boy, we're happy you didn't wind up in a hospital. Well, I could have, because for a bicycle rider, and I'm 77 years old, to come down that Carefree Road and approach this area, it's always loaded with gravel, and I have to get out into the lane of traffic to avoid getting hit.
Premature, go right ahead. Continue.
So, my only escape is to put on the brakes, bounce around in the gravel, and possibly go down, which I did. Have a wheel here that I had to pay. I have a check that I had to buy more equipment to replace what was damaged. I would appreciate very, very much you guys step up to the plate, compensate me, and let me out of here. Otherwise, I will be having to go to small claims court, spend more money, and we will run it by a judge, which your mayor told me, well, we'll just let him decide what it's best to do. And if that's what you're going to force me to do, I will do it. I'm not going away. This stinks. It is really terrible. It shouldn't be happening, because other riders, and by the way, the Sonora News even wrote an article about this, which I happen to have. So unless you guys can do what is right, compensate me, I'll be out of your hair. I'll be out riding my bike. I have an art exhibit at the Holland Center right now, 17 paintings up in their canvases up in their quail room. You're all invited to come see what I do. But I also do ride a bike for exercise, to keep going. Is that my tone?
Okay, time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that concludes call to the public. One question or comment regarding signing of code of conducts. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, has the entire council and Planning and Zoning Commission signed their annual signing of the code of conduct?
Mayor and council, the code of conduct has been signed annually, yes.
So it has been signed by all of council members and all of Planning and Zoning Commissioners?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Anything else to be said?
I have a question, Mayor,
Okay, well,
to Gary.
be careful.
Can you ask him after the meeting? Is he?
Yeah, I could,
Wait a second.
yeah,
Are you sure you're okay?
yeah, yeah, fine.
Yeah, let's do it after.
We have to just abide by the rules. Okay, hearing no other comments, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Excuse me. I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for participating. Okay, good one.